you feel behind. Not dramatically, not crisis behind, just that low, persistent hum that something isn't where it should be by now, a version of your life that was supposed to exist by this point that doesn't. And you can't point to exactly when you decided it should exist or where that version came from, but it's there. It has been there for a while. And you've gotten so used to carrying it that you've stopped noticing it's not yours. The strange thing is, you can't name a single person you're actually behind. It's more like a composite. The colleague who bought a house last year and mentioned it twice, and that was enough. The friend from university who talks about his portfolio the way other people talk about the gym, casually, like it's just a thing he does. Your cousin who always seems to have more in a way that's hard to explain but impossible to miss at family dinners. Some person on LinkedIn who sold something at an age that made you immediately check how old they were when they did it. You do that. The age check. Someone achieves something and your first instinct is to find out how old they were. And if they're younger than you, something tightens. And if they're older, you feel a complicated relief that you're still on track. Except on track for what, you couldn't say. You've assembled all of them into one figure. And that figure is always slightly ahead of you. Here's what no one asks. Behind who exactly? Not you specifically, not the real you with your actual history, the specific decisions that led here, the context that explains the picture. The version of behind you're carrying was built from other people's highlight reels, from the parts people show, from the vacation photos you saw and spent 10 minutes calculating how they could afford that, from the salary mention you tried to unhear, from the car in the driveway of someone you vaguely know. You built a finish line out of borrowed footage, and then you started running towards it. The triggers are so ordinary that you've stopped registering them as triggers. Someone says starter home, and something in you flinches, not because you don't know what it means, but because you haven't gotten there yet, and starter is supposed to be the beginning, and you're not at the beginning anymore. And calling where you live a stepping stone would require having a next step clearly visible. You see a vacation photo, somewhere warm, somewhere nice, and before you've even processed the image, you've already started the math. How much that costs, whether they saved for it or just did it, whether they can actually afford it or whether they just stopped worrying about whether they could afford it, which is a different relationship with money than the one you have, and you don't know how people get there. Someone mentions their retirement account at a dinner party, just in passing, just as context, and you go quiet in a specific way. You nod. You say something that sounds like a contribution to the conversation. And later, you look up what you should have in a retirement account by your age, and you read the number, and you close the tab. You close the tab, you don't make a plan. You close the tab, and you carry the number.
What the hum does is change how you make decisions. Not dramatically, quietly. You don't invest because the amount feels embarrassing relative to where you think you should be, like showing up to a potluck with a packet of crackers when everyone else brought something real. You don't start the thing you've been thinking about because someone younger already built something like it, and starting now feels like arriving at a party that's almost over. You track every small expense, the coffees, the subscriptions, the margins, while the larger structure of your financial life stays exactly where it is. You're optimizing the details of a building you haven't decided to build. The building doesn't care that you found a cheaper grocery brand. You've been living inside a race you invented against competitors who don't know they're competing toward a finish line that moves every time you get close. And calling that being responsible with money. There's a version of this that almost everyone does and almost no one says out loud. The age math. You have a number in your head tied to an age. By 30, this. By 35, that. It came from somewhere murky, something your parents said, something the culture just seemed to agree on without anyone sourcing it. And you absorbed it and made it the ruler. 30 came. The number wasn't there. So you quietly reset. 33. 35, definitely. 40, for certain. The deadline is always close enough to feel urgent and far enough away that you don't have to move today. And when you blow past one of those ages, there's no dramatic reckoning, just a quiet recalibration, a new deadline installed in the same slot with the same certainty. The age changes, the feeling, not yet, stays completely constant. No one talks about this because it sounds too close to failure, so everyone resets privately and assumes they're the only one who needed to. Think about the last time you actually felt okay about where you were. Not thrilled, just steady. The floor felt solid. How long did that last before something interrupted it? Before someone at work mentioned what their place is worth now, or someone said, "We finally maxed out the 401k this year," with the casual ease of someone who does not understand they just created a problem for you. And the floor dropped. Not dramatically, just enough. That is not ambition. Ambition has a direction. What you're describing is a threat response. Your nervous system receives the signal, "You are not enough," and believes it before you can argue. And because it's fast, because it disguises itself as healthy self-awareness, you never stop to question whether the thing that triggered it actually has anything to do with your real life.
Notice how you talk about money around other people. Someone brings up investing, and you nod along in a way that neither confirms nor denies. You contribute something general, something that sounds like you're in the game without specifying exactly where you're standing on the field. Someone asks about your apartment, and you have a whole practiced response that makes it sound transitional. It's fine for now, as if for now protects you from having to commit to it, as if calling it temporary makes it less real. You are managing two financial lives, the one you're actually living and the one you're performing. And maintaining both is exhausting in a way you can't explain, because explaining it would collapse the performance. The specific behaviors are where this gets honest. You scroll through finance content, not because it calms you, but because the information feels like it's closing the gap, even though you're not implementing any of it. You're not behind on knowledge. You know enough. You've known enough for a while. The information intake is not preparation, it's the performance of preparation. You make small, careful decisions with money, tracking the margins, skipping the thing that costs something real, while the larger structure of your financial life stays exactly where it is. And you spend money on things that are really about the gap. The dinner you stretched the budget for because staying home made the gap visible. The item that cost more than it should have, but signals something you needed to signal, to yourself, to the room, to the version of the story you're trying to tell about where you are. You've been spending money to manage how the gap looks, instead of closing it. There's something that happens when you live inside behind long enough. Your present financial life starts to feel like a waiting room. This isn't the real thing yet. This is the transitional version, the draft, the rough cut before the version that actually counts. The savings account is the before. The investment account you keep meaning to open is the before. The money conversation with your partner that you both know needs to happen is the before. The budget you've built in your head but not on paper is the before. And every year you are in the before. At some point, the before stops being a phase. It becomes your relationship with money. Pending. Almost. Not yet. One day. The waiting room is a protection, too, because while you're still in the before, the plan is still intact. The future version of you who handles this hasn't been tested yet. Nothing has failed. The moment you leave the waiting room, you have to find out whether that version actually shows up. And some part of you isn't ready to find out.
Here's the one that lands hardest. The colleague with the house, he's behind on something. He sees someone else and does the same calculation. The friend with the portfolio has his own figure he can't catch. Your cousin has someone she measures herself against that you'd never expect. The whole structure is comparison running in a circle. Everyone is behind someone. No one is looking at the original map. And you don't have an original map. No one ever sat with you, knowing your actual history, your actual fears, the actual life you want, and said, given all of that, here is what ahead looks like for you specifically. Here is what enough. Here's the one that lands hardest. The colleague with the house, he's behind on something. He sees someone else and does the same calculation. The friend with the portfolio has his own figure he can't catch. Your cousin has someone she measures herself against that you'd never expect. The whole structure is comparison running in a circle. Everyone is behind someone. No one is looking at the original map. And you don't have an original map. No one ever sat with you, knowing your actual history, your actual fears, the actual life you want, and said, given all of that, here is what ahead looks like for you specifically. Here is what enough is in your actual life. That map doesn't exist. You've been navigating by someone else's coordinates and calling it knowing where you're going. You Googled it. Don't pretend you didn't. Average savings by age, whatever your age is, at midnight, probably, or close to it. And you found the number, and you sat with it in a specific way that wasn't quite shame and wasn't quite relief, and was mostly just the quiet of knowing where you sit on a chart you never asked to be ranked on. Then you closed the tab, then you went to bed. You didn't make a plan. You just now know the number, and the number follows you. There's a reunion coming up, or something like it. People from a chapter of your life that had its own financial expectations attached to it, where you thought you'd all be by now, what you assumed adulthood looked like, how far apart everyone is landing. And you've already run the calculation before you've even decided to go. Not the travel cost, the other calculation, where you are versus where you thought you'd be versus where you assume they are now. And depending on how that math goes, there's a real chance you find a reason not to go. It's not that you can't afford it. It's that you can't afford to stand in a room where the gap becomes three-dimensional. A younger coworker bought a house recently. You heard about it secondhand, someone mentioned it in passing, and you felt something that had several layers. Genuine happiness for them on the surface. Underneath that, the calculation. Underneath that, the feeling about the calculation. And underneath that, the fact that they're younger than you, which shouldn't matter, and matters. You said the right thing. Congratulations. Which was true, and also not the whole truth. You do a version of this at every gathering. You listen for signals. Someone mentions a neighborhood, you know what that costs. Someone mentions a job title change, you know roughly what that means. Someone says they're finally maxing out some account, you know exactly what that means, and you nod in a way that implies you are also doing that. You are running quiet net worth calculations on people you actually like, and they are probably running the same calculation on you.
There's a specific shame in not knowing things you feel you should know by now. Someone mentions a financial term, a specific account type, a strategy, something that sounds basic and you don't know it, and instead of asking, you let the conversation move past you. You look it up alone later, and the lookup confirms it was basic. And that's a specific kind of quiet. Not ignorance, something closer to, I've been maintaining the performance of competence for so long that I've protected myself from the moments that would have actually moved me forward. The hum you've been living inside is not giving you accurate information. It is not the sound of a life going wrong. It's the sound of running someone else's race so long you forgot you were allowed to draw your own route. The Zillow listing had nothing to do with tonight. The retirement account number was built for an average, and you are not the average of the people who were averaged. The salary mention at lunch was context for a story, not evidence about your life. None of it was data about you. But you treated all of it as data about you for years. And the years are the real cost. Not the account you didn't open, not the decision you delayed. The years of carrying a measurement that was never yours, toward a finish line that was never real,
on behalf of a figure you built from people who weren't performing for you. You can stop. But first, clearly, honestly, without softening it, you have to see that you built it. None of it was real. Only the years were real.